The alarms in the archive wing were quiet that morning, which should have told me something was wrong. On this station, silence never meant peace. It meant the warriors were saving their voices for something bigger. My name doesn't matter much here. To the Dracoon, I was just the human who fixes things. I had lived among their fleet for 11 years, cataloging old weapons, repairing ancient records, and keeping my head down. The Dracoon were a proud people, tall and scaled, with eyes like burning copper. They respected strength above everything else. A human who could not lift a warhammer or win a duel was, to them, barely worth noticing. I never minded that. I had my own reasons for being there. That morning, I heard boots running down the corridor outside my workshop. Not the slow, confident steps of Dracoon warriors on patrol, but fast, panicked steps. I opened my door and saw Tark, one of the younger guards, sprinting past. "Tark," I called. "What's happening?" He stopped, chest heaving. "The council has called for a challenge. Queen Vessa may lose her seat by nightfall." That name hit me harder than he could have known. Queen Vessa was the last of the old bloodline, the family said to be chosen by the ancestors, to unite all Dracoon clans centuries ago. But bloodline alone was not enough to keep her crown. Tradition demanded proof. The sword of the first flame, a blade said to glow only in the hands of a true heir. Without it, any clan leader strong enough could challenge her right to rule. The problem was simple. The sword had been missing for over 80 years. Almost no one knew where it had gone, but I did. I closed my workshop door and sat down at my old wooden desk, the one piece of furniture I had brought from home. Underneath a false panel in the floor beneath it was a box that had traveled 3 generations in my family. Inside that box was the sword. My great-grandfather had been a young engineer working alongside Dracoon forces during the border silence, a conflict from long before I was born. During one mission, he found the blade half buried in the wreckage of an old temple, dropped by a warrior who did not survive the battle. Most humans back then would have sold it. Weapons like that were valuable, even without knowing their importance. But my great-grandfather did something else. He kept it safe, he cleaned it, studied it, and eventually understood what it meant to the people who had lost it. He wrote in his journal that a blade tied to someone's identity was not a prize to be taken. It was a piece of someone's history, and history deserved respect, not theft. He passed that belief to my grandmother. She passed it to my father. And when I left for this station, my father placed the box in my hands and said, "If the day ever comes when it can go home, let it go home." I had waited 11 years for that day. Now it seemed to be arriving faster than I expected, and with far more danger attached. I pulled the box out from under the floor panel and opened it carefully. The sword inside was long, curved slightly at the tip, with a hilt wrapped in dark leather that had somehow never rotted. Faint markings ran along the blade, symbols I could not read, but had scanned many times out of curiosity. It looked ordinary at rest. No light, no glow, nothing that hinted at legend. I wrapped it in cloth and stepped out into the corridor. The closer I got to the Great Hall, the more Dracoon I passed, all moving in the same direction. Warriors in polished armor, elders in long ceremonial robes, young clan members trying to catch a glimpse of the drama unfolding. No one looked twice at me. I was just the human carrying a wrapped bundle, weaving through the crowd like a shadow. Inside the Great Hall, the air was thick with tension. Rows of warriors lined the walls, weapons resting but ready. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat Queen Vessa. She looked calm, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who understood exactly how close she was to losing everything she had inherited. Standing before her was Commander Draxus, a broad-shouldered warrior with a scar across one eye, clearly enjoying his moment. "Without the sword of the first flame," he announced to the hall, "there is no proof of your right to lead us. The old laws are clear. Step down, or face challenge." Queen Vessa's jaw tightened. "The sword was lost generations ago. That does not erase my bloodline." "It erases your claim," Draxus said. "Tradition does not bend for convenience." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could feel the room tilting toward chaos, the kind of chaos that could tear a fleet apart from the inside. I had seen enough Dracoon history logs to know what happened when clans fought over succession. It was never quick, and it was never gentle. I stepped forward. At first, no one noticed. I was too small, too quiet, too human, to register as a threat or an interruption. But as I walked down the center aisle toward the platform, the murmurs shifted into confused whispers. "What is a human doing here? Someone remove him." A guard moved to stop me, but I held up the wrapped bundle and said, loud enough for the front rows to hear, "I have something that belongs to your queen." That got their attention. Commander Draxus turned, irritation flashing across his face. "This is not the place for human games." "I'm not playing a game," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "I'm returning something that was never mine to keep." I reached the base of the platform and knelt down, unarmed, unwrapping the cloth slowly, so everyone could see there was no trick, no hidden weapon, nothing but the blade itself. Gasps spread through the hall as the sword came into view. Even without the glow, its shape alone was unmistakable to anyone who had studied Dracoon history. Queen Vesa rose from her seat, eyes wide. "That is impossible. That blade has been lost for 80 years. "It wasn't lost," I said. "It was protected." I explained quickly, my words tumbling out faster than I meant them to. I told her about my great-grandfather, about the border silence, about a family that had carried the weight of this decision through 3 generations, rather than sell a piece of someone else's history for profit. I told her we could have turned it in for a reward decades ago, or sold it to collectors who would have paid enormous sums, or simply melted it down and forgotten it existed. But we didn't, because it was never truly ours to use that way. The hall was silent except for my voice. When I finished, I held the sword out toward her, hilt first, the way I imagined a warrior would offer a blade to someone of higher rank. Queen Vesa stepped down from the platform slowly, her guards tensing but not moving. She reached out and wrapped her hand around the hilt. The moment her fingers closed around it, the blade ignited. Not fire, not literal flame, but a deep golden light that spread from the hilt to the tip in the space of a heartbeat, illuminating the entire hall in a warm glow. Warriors gasped and stepped back. Some covered their eyes. The symbols along the blade, the ones I had never been able to read, now shimmered with meaning, and I realized they were not decoration. They were a kind of proof, activated only by the blood and lineage of the true heir. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, one by one, the warriors closest to the platform lowered themselves to their knees. It started with Commander Draxus, whose scarred face had gone pale with shock. Then the elders, then the guards along the walls. Within seconds, the entire hall had bent low before their queen, the glowing sword raised in her hand as undeniable proof of everything she had claimed to be. I remained kneeling too, though not out of tradition. My legs simply hadn't caught up with the moment yet. Queen Vesa turned toward me, the glow reflecting in her copper eyes. "You could have sold this," she said quietly, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You could have used it as leverage over my people, or handed it to my enemies to destabilize this fleet. Why bring it here, to me, with nothing asked in return?" I thought about how to answer that honestly, because power that isn't yours to take was never meant to be used as a weapon. I said, "My family didn't protect this sword so we could control anyone with it. We protected it because it mattered to someone else, and that was reason enough." She studied me for a long moment, the hall still silent around us. "Among my people," she said, "strength is often measured by what a warrior is willing to take. You have shown me something different today. Strength measured by what a person is willing to give back." She turned to address the hall, her voice carrying easily now that the sword's light had settled into a steady, quiet glow. "Let it be known that this human, and the family before him, held more honor in their hands than many warriors hold in their hearts. He will be welcomed among us, not as a soldier, but as something this fleet has never named before, a keeper of trust." The warriors rose from their knees, and for the first time in 11 years, I felt eyes on me that weren't dismissive or indifferent. They were something closer to respect, cautious and unfamiliar, but real. Commander Draxus approached me afterward, his earlier irritation replaced by something quieter. "I misjudged you," he said simply. "That is not something I say often." "You didn't know," I answered. "Neither did I, until today, whether this moment would end in triumph or disaster." He almost smiled. "For a human, you carry surprising weight." In the weeks that followed, my workshop stayed the same. small and cluttered with old machine parts. But the way people walked past it changed. Warriors who once ignored me began stopping to nod, or occasionally to ask questions about human history, curious now about the kind of people who could hold on to something precious for 3 generations without ever using it for personal gain. Queen Vesa visited once, not as a ruler addressing a subject, but almost as an equal seeking a quiet conversation. She asked about my great-grandfather, about the journal he had kept, about what kind of person chooses patience over profit, when profit was so easily within reach. He believed some things aren't meant to be owned, I told her, only protected until they can go home. She nodded slowly, glancing at the sword now resting in a place of honor within the great hall, its glow dimmed to a soft, steady light. "You gave my people back more than a weapon," she said. "You gave us proof that trust between our kinds is possible, even when we expect so little of each other." I thought about my great-grandfather then, a young engineer who never lived to see this moment, who simply believed that doing the right thing mattered, even when no one was watching. He never could have imagined that his quiet choice, made decades before I was born, would one day steady an entire fleet on the edge of collapse. Sometimes the smallest human decisions carry weight far beyond what we can see in the moment. Mine had been 11 years of silence. His had been 80 years of patience. Together, they had returned something that mattered, not through conquest, not through strength, but through the simple, stubborn belief that some things are worth protecting, even when it costs you everything to keep them safe.